Right. I've got a new phone. It's a Pixel 8. The reason I got the yeah, I know. The reason I got the Pixel 8, three reasons. One, sister said it was a good idea. She's well into the phone stuff. Two, it wasn't that expensive. And three, because the phone that I have, what I realized is a bit big. I used a pop socket all the way through. It's somewhere. It was a bit big, and I didn't like having to put my thumb all the way to the top and then like wiggle your hand to scroll the thing down. And yeah, it's a bit of an inconvenience. My hands aren't huge. So I wanted a smaller phone, and the Pixel 8 is a smaller phone. I was like, great. And it's got a good camera, so I can use it for video. But what it was that I wanted to talk to you about was because it's Google, obviously, Google Assistant. One of my biggest frustrations with the Samsung that I had, A71, I think, was I had to turn the phone on and sign in before I could use Google Assistant.
Yeah.
There was no way for me to use Google Assistant, say, hey Google, sorry if you're listening to this and your Google's just like said something, my phone just did. And and I didn't like that. Now with this Google Pixel, I can say it without having to push the buttons or do anything. So when it's on my
Mm.
desk, I can just talk when I want to add a task to Google Tasks,
Oh, nice.
which are like, well, yeah, great. I don't use Google Tasks, but Morgan has integrations with Google Tasks. And what I was doing yesterday, I was fiddling around because I was driving to coaching. I was fiddling around and I thought, you know what? Instead of sitting here trying to have to remember all the things, when I don't know whether you're in actually, you probably don't because you don't drive, but when you're driving and you think of something, you can't write something on your phone because you're driving. So you sit there and you think, I'm going to think of this until I get to my destination and I can write this down. Or I'm going to sit here until there's a red light. Then I'm going to write it down really, really quickly on a notes app in some kind and hope that it makes sense when I need to go again. But with Google Assistant, I can just talk out loud. So I don't have to remember any of those things. And I was like, this is great. And I can see it on Morgan.
That that is cool. That is very nice.
So I've been looking at my Google Tasks, and it did work. Oh, okay. I'm just looking at Morgan now because I was going to check my Google Tasks. So I have two different Google Task accounts. This is one of those technical fiddly bits, right? So when when you add a task through Google Assistant, it adds it to the default Google account.
Um,
The default Google account is the first account you signed into on the device.
which would be your personal.
Yeah. So I had my personal task, well, Google Tasks were going into my personal account, and Morgan has let me add that one in as a Google Task account, which is really nice. But I thought, well, I want it on my business one. So I figured, can I swap it? And I can swap it. So I removed my personal account from my phone, then added it back because the next account was my business one. So now when I add a Google Task, it goes to my business account, but I have my business and my personal Google accounts both inside of Morgan. So it doesn't matter where the tasks are, they go inside of Morgan, which is nice. So I now have a collated area for both Google Tasks accounts plus all the other like connected accounts, which is just it's really nice. It's really cool. It's really simple.
I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's one of those things you're like, I I never thought I would use it, but now I am. So yeah.
Funny that. Yeah, yeah. I like it.
Then so right. That was the tech thing I wanted to say. The other thing I wanted to say is about I don't know whether did you watch the last video about trampoline insurance or Dr. Mike? I reacted to Dr. Mike.
Oh no, I saw your trampoline insurance one where it was talking about how you may not actually be able to teach the way you want to teach because of that. I watched that one, which was like, oh, I bet that's annoying.
Yes, yes. Obviously, my story is continuing through coaching trampoline.
Mhm.
And trampoline parks, I went to have a visit one and speak to a manager of one. Let me know your thoughts on this, because I don't know if there's anything like this in the business world, but in the sports world, most people think when you say trampoline, they think trampoline park. In trampoline parks, you get those shoes, those sticky shoes. They don't have them because you get more money by buying them. They don't have them because of branding. They have them because of insurance. The insurance says you have to have sticky shoes, like sticky bits at the bottom of shoes. but they have to be in certain places just in case your foot gets stuck in the wrong place. So you can't have the sticky bits right on the back of the heels, because then if you put your foot down and it gets stuck, it could hurt your ankle. So different trampoline parks, depending on the insurance companies they go through, have to have different types of sticky trampoline shoes, which is why trampoline parks say you have to wear our socks, sorry. In trampoline, there's trampoline shoes, which is like why I keep miscalling it shoes. Yeah. So you have to have certain trampoline socks in certain trampoline parks because of the insurance companies. Yeah, it's so silly. And then in trampoline clubs, you don't need like sticky shoes at all. You just wear socks because of the types of trampoline. Or you can wear trampoline shoes, which are like, I guess ballet shoes, just with like really sticky bottoms. They're like shoes that you just use as socks instead. But yeah, so the two things, the trampoline club and the trampoline park, are drastically different when it comes to insurance. But the people that say, yes, you can be insured, no, you can't be insured, treat them the same. Yeah, I see your confused face. Yeah,
That doesn't make any sense.
I agree. So essentially, trampoline clubs, the insurance is going up. Why?
Yeah.
Because more people are getting injured on trampolines. Where? Trampoline parks
Parks, yeah.
and on garden trampolines, where you have rusty springs, really unmaintained or poorly maintained trampoline beds where they rip in the middle because they've been out in the rain for 7-8 months with no cover, no adult supervision, and kids in a group together building themselves up to do silly things on a trampoline. So the insurance people are saying trampoline dangerous, increase insurance, extreme sport, high likelihood of injury. Yeah. And trampoline clubs are having to pay for this.
Jeez.
And what makes me giggle is when you look at the so this I mentioned this towards the end of the Dr. Mike reaction video. When you look at doctors and their view on trampoline, they talk about trampoline parks and garden trampolines. They don't mention organized sport. But when you look at sport as physical activity, not competitive sport, physical activity, what's that good for? Physical health, mental health, and well-being, and community engagement. Because you get people in a community talking together, working together to do X, Y, Z things. So I'm like, hold up a second. So the health department, the health industry want people to be more physically active. They want people to focus on their well-being, their mental health by working with others, communicating with others, going out and doing things. But they're not going to recommend organized sport because it's dangerous because of the recreational sport that has nothing to do with it. Yeah. I'm like, the logic is backwards. It's like you're going A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 squares, triangles, circles. Like, what?
Reminds me, it's not quite similar, but it's also similar in some ways. It kind of made me think about a conversation I was seeing in a business chat about someone who's like, all the coaches are just doing one thing, and business coaches are just telling me what to do and doing that, but not helping me actually do the thing. They're just talking to me, and I'm like, cool, hello. One, hello. Two, I know. And the instant reactions were, you need a VA, you need a virtual assistant, you need this, you need that. And I'm like, but that's not what they're saying. Because they know what they need to do. They just don't know how to put the pieces together to do it. So hiring a VA or an OBM or someone else is going to make it worse, because then you've got to try and tell someone else how to do the thing, but you're struggling to do the thing. So how are you, as the leader, supposed to tell the other person what to do when you don't know what you're supposed to do yourself?
Yeah, but this is where I like what I'm doing. Like when I look at the views of the videos, they're down. I totally understand that it's lower than 100, but it's actually like how coaching happens, how coaching works. It's not sort of like just a couple of instructions. Like insurance is an issue. Finding facilities is an issue. The funding, the philosophy, the ideas, like they're all coaching issues. And what you're talking about there to me is like, here is a coaching issue, and someone's sort of trying to put a plaster on it.
Yeah.
Like, no, actually learn how to do the thing. That's what it sounds like they're looking for. Like, how do I actually get this done by myself? Because I don't want to
And
use a
it's a lot,
VA
I
or
mean, it's a lot of pressure to hire someone else on because then you are responsible for that other person. It means you have to bring in more income to subsidize the person that you're adding in. And there are so many different, different things that happen, so many variables that get in the way, things that you don't even realize until it happens. And then you're like, well, I just needed someone to help me get through the things I needed to get done. And that doesn't involve a VA because a VA is going to rely on you to tell them what to do, unless they are a very special VA, in which case they're just going to go and do the thing. But then if that VA goes, you're then in trouble because then you don't know how they did the thing.
Yep.
And it probably won't match how you would do the thing if you had to do the thing because people naturally do the thing that they feel is right and that fits them. So then you're a bit screwed again, and you're just stuck in this spiral of, yeah. So I was like, I saw that today. I was like, no, no, please don't hire a VA yet. Until you know what you're doing, do not hire a VA
Yep. Agreed. Agreed.
or an
And
OBM or anything like that. Like, don't hire anyone until you know how you do
what's an OBN abbreviated?
online business manager. So someone who
Oh, right.
manages your business, which is like if you don't know what you're doing or you know what you want to achieve, and that was the problem that I see most of the time, which is why I do what I do now. People know what they want to do, they're just not sure of the steps, the bits in between, the actions to take to achieve the behavior that they wanted. And so they're stuck. So
Out of
why would I hire?
curiosity,
Yeah.
when it comes to the problems that you see business owners have, is there instructional content or something like what I'm doing, like a vloggy explanation of those problems and the experiences people go through? Because from what I've seen, it's just buy my course, go do my seminar,
Yeah.
etc.
Not really. It might be something that's worth exploring. I mean, I've started creating some content already. My socials are now actually having social content on it, which is so very difficult to do. Trying to summarize perception and action in a 4 slides was probably the hardest thing I've had to do. I'm like, there's so much context that I'm missing that I want to share, but I can't share all the context because no one really cares. But I did content, so I was happy. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think there is a bloggy piece there that I could probably play on. I'd have to check with the clients that they'd be happy, or maybe it's just the things I see on the internet, actually. That would work. Yeah.
Yeah, because obviously, if you've got clients that have problems, you don't even have to like say who the is or any
Yeah.
details. It's just I was working with a client, could have been really in the past or whenever. This was a problem they had, or this is a problem I had that I related to them with. This was the experience, kind of like a business story time, I guess.
Yeah. That's not a bad idea.
But yeah, because obviously the struggles that I see other coaches make during a session, when I see that, I guess I'll add a little bit of context. I was watching someone, so Alex Sarama has recorded quite a few of his basketball sessions, and me as a coach, I love that because I can actually see what it is that they're coaching. They're not talking about it abstractly. I can see the interactions. I can see how people differ in their behavior. I can see what they do. I can see what they don't do. Then I can ask questions about what I like, what I don't like, what I don't understand, what I do understand. And that to me is more practically useful than speaking
Mm.
abstractly about these ideas, which is why I'm doing the vlog. And inside of business, I imagine it's the same sorts of things. If if you get a very broad answer, it's very hard to put it into practice.
Yeah.
And thinking about that, that actually relates to the woman that I met yesterday at the BSL meetup. She had been learning BSL has been learning for over 2 years. And she said to me, so she's a I think she's a level 1, but failed a level 2, or maybe failed a level 1. I don't remember. to be honest, I wasn't paying that much attention because level qualifications don't mean that much with BSL. I'm not qualified, but I could pass a level 1. It's just I don't have 300 spare quid. And then there are other people that have like BSL as their main language, and they're like a level 1 or level 2 because they don't want to spend loads of money on a piece of paper they don't need. So you can look at someone that's deaf and go, "Oh, you're level 6? No, what level are you?" I'm not, but they're fluent. Yeah. But yeah, so she's been learning BSL for over 2 years and she really struggles. And I said, "Well, how have you been practicing?" And she said, "Oh, with my teacher." So the teacher says what to do. She practices the thing, like rote repetition, do it over and over and over again, then you'll remember it. And she just doesn't. And when it comes to a conversation, her receptive skills aren't as good as she would want them to be. So she struggles to understand what the deaf person's saying. And then it takes her a long time to work out what sign to use in the right way to make it make sense for them. And she's just worried about making mistakes. And it's because the practice isn't experience. And that to me is where ecological dynamics differs from cognitive psychology most of the time when I see the behaviors of practice. It's representative practice design, repetition without repetition. It's the experiences that you're engaging in, not the isolated, highly constrained situations that have been made up for who knows what reason.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that experience piece that really does make it's really interesting hearing my kids talk about like, oh, I can't do that. Okay, why not? Oh, well, I haven't learned it yet. Oh, okay. So how do you know how to do this? And how do you know how to do this? Oh, well, I learned it. Okay. And it's really interesting hearing them talk like that. And I'm like, okay. And when it's really hard, they're really struggling. Especially this morning, that was something that I think it was my daughter who said, oh, this is so hard, this is too hard. I'm like, yeah, because you're learning. Yes. Yes, it's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, you wouldn't be learning. Like you're not learning anything if it's not a little bit difficult.
I would say you're always learning.
Yeah,
So,
effective learning, I suppose.
well, no, I'd still say you're always learning, even because if you have expertise in something and you're doing something that you find extremely simple, you're still learning. Because if you don't do anything, because learning is
Oh,
experience,
that's
isn't it?
true. That's true.
So we're always learning. This is what I was saying to James the other day, because he's trying to understand ecological psychology, but he's so embedded within the cognitive psychology terminology that he's like, what is it? And I I don't like that I do this, but I'm doing it because I feel like it helps people understand. I started doing it with you, or when I started doing it with you, I think you made bigger strides. And it's not cutting the person off, but it's pausing and letting them be aware of the way I would rephrase the sentence. And so when James was saying stuff, I'm like, I would say it like this, or I would say it like that. I
Is
wouldn't
that
use that word.
one of the things that I've noticed as I'm kind of sharing it with more people when I talk one-on-one with people is that the language is so close. It's just a very simple, tiny reframe that's often needed. And then people are like, oh.
Mm,
And it's not this big, I think we've said this before, it's not this big, massive, transformative thing that everyone thinks that things need to be to actually make a difference. Because on the day-to-day basis, we do pretty much the same thing, but how we interact with it is very different. Like the assumptions that we bring to it are very different. It's like, it's so much easier to mess up, and it's so much easier to it's easier just to do things because the only way you're going to figure out what it is through experience instead of having to get it in your short-term memory, long-term memory, rote repetition and repeat it lots of times. It's just, okay, cool. I will learn through my experience. And then you look at how successful business owners have done all of this. They've done it through experiences and then they're selling their experience. That's all they're doing. And then you have newer business owners who come in and buy the experiences and then, oh, it's not worked. Of course it's not. It won't work exactly identically
it
because there
can't.
is nuance to how you work. And so it's about sharing that nuance with how things work, which is the most interesting part.
Yeah, I think so. Something that I feel has made some more uh, impact, made a bit of an indent with the way that James is explaining his experiences, is he was saying that he's starting to learn about XYZ thing. And I said, well, haven't you already started? What do you mean? It was like, using UK politics as an example, because we were talking before the election, he was saying, well, I'm trying to learn about UK politics. I said, well, what are you trying to learn about UK politics? Well, how it works. It's like, yeah, but you already know a lot. So you've already started learning. Well, yeah, but it's not the same. I was like, you know what UK politics is. You know that there's a blue, there's a red, there's an orange, there's a green. Well, yeah, I know you've got Labour and Conservative. So you know the names of the parties as well. That's more than people outside of the UK, more than some people inside the UK, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So you know a lot about UK politics. Oh yeah, but I don't know how. And then he was saying like how meetings work inside the politics. So I'm like, yeah, but which meeting? Because you've got different people that have different meetings for different reasons, and different people turn up depending on the topic of conversation. And we're like, oh well, I didn't know that. It's like, oh, okay, so you're learning about which meetings, and it's this ongoing experience. He said, well, I know you've got Prime Minister's questions. I'm like, Prime Minister's questions is not quite a meeting. That's what the public see. That's more of the Prime Minister's side sort of going, hey, did you know that we're doing this? And Prime Minister goes, yes, we did. And he's like, okay, great, cool. Showboating for the camera. And then the other side goes, yeah, but you haven't done this. And then it's just like a showboaty argument fest of what's going on in paperwork. But that's what the public see. That's what he sees. And he wasn't aware of that. So just the conversation was him learning. But he didn't start learning about UK politics when he put it on his calendar and decided to sit down and go, I'm going to learn about UK politics. No, he'd already started. We've all already started. The fact that you're having this conversation or listening to this conversation means that you're learning about UK politics, whether you want to or not, unfortunately. So the reframing of that was, I want to learn this thing, reframed to, I want to understand more about this part of this thing. I want to gain expertise in this element of this conversation.
Yeah.
And it's just the reframing of the sentence allows people to attune to what it is that they're actually going to do, what they're actually going to behave, which is attunement, affordances, constraints. Because now that you have a direction, you don't have a goal, you have a direction of behavior, direct goal-directed behavior. You move towards the goal. If the goal shifts, you move towards the new goal. If it shifts too far away from the original goal-directed behavior, that's where you reattune your focus. That is where the coach, the learning environment, the assistance, something comes in to help, or you develop expertise so you can coach yourself to reattune yourself. But that's all, again, skills built up over experience.
So I have a question for you.
Just one.
Loads. Well, you have an interesting opinion on labels. I don't know whether that has your opinion changed that labels are not useful.
No, I still don't think they're very useful.
So my question to you is, why are they not useful? Because as we're talking about like exactly what you just said, I see labels as that. They are directions. As I've been talking to people who get the diagnosis, who start understanding ADHD, autism, LGBTQ stuff, like all of these labels, it affords them different opportunities for behavior because they are now attuning to like, oh, this is a thing. Like my experience is similar to this. And most of the time they're not like my experience is exactly the same. It's like these are the things that I now see. Oh, this all starts to make sense. It's adding the context surrounding their behavior, and it helps lead them into different directions.
So I would say it does the opposite. I don't think it affords, I think it constrains.
Interesting.
Because when you say a label, a word, something to communicate something else, you're constraining the explanation down to the syllables, the symbols, the whatever it is that you've said.
I don't agree. I don't think it does because
if with UK politics, if I say UK politics, are you thinking about US politics?
No.
So you've constrained your view of what politics is.
Yes.
So it's constraining what it is that you're thinking about to UK politics. If you then say Commons, you're now constraining to the room of Commons in the UK politics. So if you want to understand about the Commons that relates to something else, that practice is constrained. I'm not saying it's
Yes,
ineffective, but
but
I would say it's
but
constraining.
then if I'm thinking about UK politics, I may then want to go, oh, I wonder how US politics is different. So then I started from the constrained view, and then I'm moving out to a more unconstrained or a shall we say differently constrained view.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
I'm moving between constraints, and then I'm having that because that's been my experience. Like, and talking to other people, it's less so about like the labels of forcing them to think a certain way. It's giving them an alternative to the view that they had previously of themselves, the assumptions that they had about themselves, whether good or bad, true or false is irrelevant. It's like they go, oh, so these things kind of make sense to me from this perspective. Like this is but what about this? This is different. And when I started exploring, when I looked at neurodiversity, ADHD, autism, all of those pieces, it was very much like that sort of makes sense. And then I explored further versus actually being constrained in, and I've just stayed in that box. Now, that is not to say that everyone does this because there are people who do that. But I think that is
You do.
often exactly professional do. But I think that's the perceived from the internet because obviously it's a tiny snapshot versus the experience of those who whose lived experience is that of ADHD, autism, queer, all of those labels, and it allows them to explore. It's almost like that kind of psychological safety. The labels are safe. They feel safe because the labels help them to
They
explore.
can feel safe. Just gonna.
They can feel safe. Yes, they can feel safe to explore and go, oh, I wonder. So I suppose it is a constraint and also an affordance because that's how it works. I think it
The,
is,
we perceive affordances. The affordances are
yes,
already there.
that's true.
What the label is doing is constraining. The label is constraining which affordances are more likely to be perceived in the attunement of an
Hmm.
individual's view. If the label wasn't there, would you still be able to view things in the way that you do through the label? Yes. Is it as easy? No.
No.
That's the simplicity that comes with constraints. The reason I
Yeah, that's,
don't so,
yeah, go
so
on.
constraints can be useful. Yes, it's the same as simplifying any practice. The reason I don't like the labeled constraints is the additional baggage that comes with the label. That's the social constraints that's added. So linguistically, yes, fine, makes total sense. That's why we use words. Like
Yeah.
if labels were just linguistic constraints and for words and communication, totally fine with it. When you add social context and the social constructs that come along with those labels, that's where I feel that it's not useful, not helpful, because now it's heavily constrained because you have so much of the social context often online that comes with the label. If the person can use the label without the the social constraints, yes, very beneficial. But to be able to do
And
that
I,
requires a lot of control and coaching or assistance to
yeah,
create the
so
environment.
that's interesting because, yeah, I can see kind of both sides of that. Of like, you see the people, oh no, I'm so ADHD, look at me. And that I find hard, yes. But also, that's an expression of like them starting to figure stuff out. And I think my hope, maybe I am incredibly, can't think of the word that I'm looking for right now, but that's fine. I'll find it in a minute. That often prompts discovery. That often prompts them to look more and understand more.
See, I still don't think that makes sense for me because they have
Mm.
already started exploring it. The fact that they've said that they are ADHD means they've already started exploring what ADHD is.
And so they've explored that, and now they are continuing their exploration, and they're almost constraining it to themselves so that they understand. It's almost attaching, finding meaning to the way that they work and understanding that. And yes, there is that baggage, but also there is the opportunity for them to go a different way and go, so that's my experience. That sounds like this, that sounds like that. But then I suppose equally there is that baggage which can get in the way.
The
So it's
way that
about, yeah.
the way that I see it is they are already exploring it. If they're
Yes.
already exploring it, then they can recognize they are attuned to the behaviors that they are doing that either may be different from others that they are seeing, or they are finding difficult in some way. Otherwise, they wouldn't be exploring it or looking up anything.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Because we're always perceiving affordances in the environment because
Yes.
we are experiencing things. So if we see someone do something that we don't recognize as a behavior that we do, we will immediately make a comparison because that's what affordances are. We can do
Yeah.
it, they can't do it. Why can they do it? Why can't we do it? And those things, it's not a, oh, I'm choosing to do this in my centric. No, you don't unconscious. No, that's what you're perceiving. You are directly perceiving the environment, how other organisms interact with their environment, because you are part of that system as you're experiencing the world. The words that people then choose to use to explain those behaviors can be behavioral, which is what I choose to use.
Yeah.
Or they can be grouped using descriptive words. As soon as you group behaviors for descriptive words, you
So
now
it's kind of
you now
it,
simplify it.
it's almost like the neurodiverse versus ADHD, autistic. Like it's how much grouping do you think is appropriate or effective in describing your experience? Which is why for me, neurodiverse is a bit amalgamous because it doesn't make sense, but equally there is loads of different definitions inside that, and it's not behaviorally based. So I suppose then with that, it's the behaviorally based labels, which is ridiculously long-winded way of saying behaviors.
Oh yeah. The way I would say this is you can describe the way that you are different through your behaviors, which
Yes.
is more accurate to what your experience is. Or you can try and group similar behaviors together to other people that have similar behaviors and then call that something. But the calling that something isn't accurate to either experience. It's the
Mhm.
same way when you're assessing someone's performance. And
Mhm.
so there's loads of studies on this when it comes to elite performance. The golf swing is one that I mentioned inside of the How We Learn to Move video. You have 10 elite golfers, they all have a swing. You measure the way that they swing, their backlift, the movement of the hips, the elbows. You bring all that together into an average and you can say, there's the perfect golf swing. But none of the expert golfers swing like that. That is what, for me, I feel like a lot of the labels do. They look at all the behaviors of people, they bring an average together and go, that is this thing. But none of the
Mm.
people in there are that thing. So if you want to find a solution to that thing, the solution doesn't work for anyone because the average doesn't represent any of them. It
I
represents
suppose there's that solution focus, whereas
precisely.
I think that's where like yes, I agree, but I see it slightly differently.
Mhm.
Like it's solution focused, but it's there we unpick the labels because the labels are just a thing.
Yeah,
But
but
it
what's the
help
thing
when
for?
exploration, it's a place to get started.
But they're already exploring it. So it's got to be after
Sometimes I
some
don't
exploration.
like I don't think they are fully aware that they are.
How can you not be aware that you're exploring behavioral comparison?
Don't or they don't maybe they just don't recognize they're not attuned to it. It's helping them if I switch the language around, it's the depth that they are attuned to the information. It's there, but they don't see it or
Do you have
perceive
an
it.
example that you could talk through? A story time example, or just like a made up example?
I mean, yeah, there are so many.
Pick one.
It's the assumption of like being lazy, for example. People with ADHD are often portrayed as lazy because they are doing XYZ or ABC or they can't stay focused and they assume that they're lazy, there's something wrong with them. So they
Pause for a second.
start,
So you've got lazy, staying focused, ADHD. They're all words
yes.
that we are using to communicate. Which one are we going to
Yes.
focus on?
Oh, which one do you fancy focusing on? The
Well,
ADHD one is probably the one to focus on.
because you said lazy, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, lazy means lots of different things because that is
Yes.
inherently a label.
Yes.
So I thought you were going to focus on lazy, and then you said the others. So where do you want to?
Well, mm, I suppose lazy is a good place to start
Hmm?
because that's the behavior. Like they feel lazy.
Lazy is not a behavior. Lazy is a description of people's observations of other people's behavior, which is different.
That's true. Yeah.
because I can look at you and go, you're lazy, or you can think yourself, I'm lazy, or we can both guess what someone else is doing with their intentions and go, oh, that's lazy, but we don't know what their intentions are. They're three different
Mm,
observations of behavior that we could categorize as lazy, but
mm,
that's not necessarily true, depending on how you define true epistemologically, of course. So lazy as a label itself isn't describing a behavior.
mm.
And that's where I get frustrated when people start using words, labels, to explain generalized, averaged data
Yeah.
because it's not accurate to the person's experience.
Okay, let me try to be more specific because that's probably would be more useful. I was
Well,
trying
it's
to
more
generalize.
accurate.
Yeah, and more accurate. So let's say a behavior is I want to achieve something. I'm aiming to do a thing. Let's say it is write a piece of content, for example.
Right.
I've been thinking about this piece of content for a while, but I can't seem to get started. There is so much information I have that I can't get started, and I feel stuck. And there is a whole bunch of other things happening around me, which is distracting, which is making it harder to get the thing done because all I'm hearing is this and I'm hearing is that. And there are a bunch of sounds all around me.
So you said you struggle to get started. I disagree because you've already started.
Yes.
Timescales. So
Yeah.
you have started.
Yes.
So what haven't you
However,
started?
good. I like that. So I haven't started this piece of content, which I've given myself a deadline for.
Yeah, but what part of it haven't you started? Because you have
The
started.
writing. The writing.
Right. So you haven't started putting words where?
In Notion, shall we say?
Okay. And you're not putting words in Notion because.
Because I don't know where to begin. Because I've got a load of ideas that are flying around my head, and
So
I don't know what.
but you, sorry, you've got loads of ideas flying around your head, which means you've started thinking about the
Yes,
content. And you're not writing them, again, obviously a hypothetical, you're not writing them down in Notion because you don't know where to get started. But saying you don't know where to get started assumes that start has an answer,
that's true.
but the start an answer because you've already started.
Yes,
So there is a barrier in some way for you to not write something. It's not that you
yes.
don't know what to write. It's to me,
There
you
is a
don't know.
barrier. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't know what's the right thing to write,
Mhm.
which assumes there's a measure. So who's measuring the quality of the writing?
I suppose we would be, like I would be, or there is the assumptions of other people measuring the quality of the writing. Let's say it's for posting on social media or something else. But yes, if we bring it back, it is just the individual.
Yeah. So for them to start, again, in big air quotes, writing this piece of content before it goes public, they need to get over their own measurement barrier to what
Mhm.
is good or what not is good. So the
Mhm.
behavior there is constricted by their own perceived expertise or measure of what is
Mhm.
good and what not is good when writing. But then I would ask, okay, so what is a good piece of writing? And if they go, I don't know, then they don't know what the measure is, which is stopping
Mhm.
them from writing something.
Mm.
Like, or you're never going to start something if you don't know what the measure is good or bad to start something. Like that just makes it impossible. It's not physically possible to do something if you don't know what you don't know because you don't know it.
I don't know. Maybe.
So
But yeah.
the behavior is again because behavior is mind and body, it's a dualism, it's together. The behavior has started, the behavior has continued. How do you shift the behavior from less external and more external, i.e., written or verbally explained?
Mhm.
That would then be the question.
And so let's say that that's the case, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm like, okay, so how do I shift that? I'm able to self-coach myself through that. And then I go out the room and I'm thirsty. I get thirsty, so I need a drink. So I leave my room and I come out, start making a drink, and then family need me or this thing need like other things come up. And so I end up doing those things, or some other. This is a common experience for those with ADHD, is that they go from one thing to another, to another, to another, to another, to another. Like it's just dotted around. Do I see that as a problem? No. But anyway, that's another matter.
Yep.
Putting all that aside, just using the assumption that ADHD is a bad thing that needs fixing, or autism is a bad thing that needs fixing, which I do not believe, but we're just going to use that for now. And
Yep.
so they start pottering around, like, and then they come back and they have forgotten and they are now stuck. Did they know when before they were now? Yes, I can immediately think of things to help, because before you leave to get your drink, you can put a few things down. There are things you can do to make things easier for you.
But they can't put things down. That's the point. That's the barrier.
Mm. Oh, but
Yeah.
let's assume that they've managed to get over themselves now, to clarify.
Right, okay.
Let's assume they've managed to move past that. They've self-coached, kind of what you would say, which is exactly what I would do for myself. If I was stuck in that situation, I'd be like, right, cool. I'm getting stuck on what? What is this? What is that? Like, and I can take myself through that. Easy. I start writing and then I need a drink.
Simple, easy.
No, it's not easy, but simple. Yes, thank you. And so I go, I'm going to go get a drink now. And then there is a heck of a lot that just, and it could definitely feel like that sometimes, where there's just lots of things that happen, and I see other opportunities for action in the environment, and I'm like, oh, I need to do this, and oh, I need to do, like, I need to fold my washing, and I've got a friend coming up next week, so I need to think about that, and. But I have a piece of content that I want to put out. Like that's a thing I want to do. But also with these other things I need to do or want to do too. And so there is that I'm gonna bounce from thing to thing, and that is a bad thing because I'm not getting the thing I want to get done.
So I didn't really hear a question in there, but the way that I view that is if you're moving from situation to situation, you're moving environment, so affordances are going to change because you're perceiving
Yeah.
varied affordances.
Mhm.
My immediate question would be, how do you limit the amount of affordances you can perceive, which could be potential distractions? How do you limit that?
It is very difficult to do. If we use that,
See, I disagree.
Okay,
I disagree
I'm very intrigued.
because yes, you're not in control of a lot of the environments you're in, but there are lots of things you can do to reduce that. Like if you go out of the room and you see that you need to do the washing up, the drying up, and you need to clean lots of things, get ready for other people. Well, when you do that and you go back to your room, the next time you leave your room, you've already done that. So
Oh, that's yeah.
so
Mhm.
those things aren't there anymore. So I don't see that, oh, I'm doing loads of things at once. No, it's a continuous time. So
Mhm.
once you've done the washing up, you don't have to do the washing up again because you've already done it.
Mhm.
If the next thing's cooking, well, now you've got a different affordance, but now you're further forwards in time. Now it's a different distraction. But if you,
But then, as I do that, let's say I pick something up, and I'm using a very traditional ADHD thing here. I pick something up, I walk over, and I'm hungry now, and I need to go and get food. So I put down this thing that I was doing. Let's say I'm folding some washing, and just put it down out the way, and then I go and do that other thing, and then I'm halfway through that task, and then I go and do another thing, and then I'm halfway through that task, and then I go do another thing. I'm
no,
using the language.
I
Whether
know,
I fully agree is different.
I know. I'm shaking my finger for those that listen in auditorily. When it comes to I'm halfway through that task, no, you're not halfway through that task because the task is never completed. The task is never started. It's always continuous. Like I'm wearing clothes. This is part of the washing up cycle. I will need to put this in the wash. I will need to, well, parents will do the washing because they're very particular about what colors go where and what time. But yeah, but there is a washing cycle. So it's not I've now completed the washing.
Just a side note, that is not this family. It's just like, right, it's dirty, go in the wash. She gives a shit. Like,
Oh no, colors have got to be together, and then whites together, and then darks together, and they go out in different, and yeah, and then it goes to the washing line. If it doesn't go washing line, it goes in the air. Yeah, but yeah, so it's not this task is half completed, or that I need to start doing this, or I need to end doing it. No, they are all continuous because it's lived experiences. It's continuous cycles of behaviors.
Mhm.
So you don't, I'm doing lots of different tasks. No, you're living, you're experiencing. If you do
Mm.
something, then you're behaving and doing something. If you
But
do
what
something
if
else,
it
you're not
doesn't
behaving and
get?
doing something.
But what if it doesn't But then you've got those assumptions that are there of like, but what if it doesn't get done?
What's done?
not within my periphery to do.
Yeah, but so you start doing the washing up with the mug, yeah, and you got half the washing up done, and then you realize actually, you know what, I'm going to cook food. If you're still in the kitchen and you see the washing up there and you've got space between doing the food, are you going to stand there, wait for the food, and not do the washing up?
I
I don't.
wouldn't know.
I don't think most people would. I personally don't. But
But some do. Like I experienced that with my other half. She does. She will not.
as in
It's like
she'll.
out of she will stand when there's other things going on. There will be whether it's a phone, whether it's just in our own world. There's also pain there as well. So there's lots of other things, and so maybe it's not even standing there then.
So I
Maybe
was going to say, so when using the example we've got, they started doing the washing up. Maybe they just put a pan in the bowl and they thought, you know what, I should probably start cooking. They turn around, they start getting pasta out, and then they start cooking. And as it starts boiling, they now have a moment where they don't need to do anything to the cooking, and they see the pan. Are they going to ignore the pan?
they don't see the pan.
They can't not see the pan if it's in the same environment.
I agree, but that is not the lived experience. They for something I don't know because this is
Mm.
not my
Yeah.
experience. I agree. If I see something, I will just go and do it. And that frustrates my wonderful other half because I'll just go boop 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 into it. Like what we're discussing is not my experience
Mm.
because I will switch between tasks. I sometimes end up
Yeah,
spending
I hate that
hours
term,
on.
switching between tasks.
Yeah, I know it's the language. I
Yeah.
will continue. I will have a continued experience. There we go. Like I will
You'll,
have my
you'll,
continued
you'll do
experience.
something different. You'll behave differently.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
will behave differently, and I can very happily potter along, and then eventually I'll come back to this,
Hmm.
to the thing that I was originally working on. That's okay.
Yeah.
I have attuned to that for me.
You
Like
develop those.
yeah, I can use those skills. But there is a for people and also for people listening, please share your experiences because this is
Mhm.
hard because I am in a very like I perceive things differently to you. So share
Yeah.
your experiences of
Everyone does.
yeah, like your specific experience where you feel this is where your ADHD or your autism or your thing or this or that gets in your way because this would be really helpful because I still believe that they are not as useful as assumed, but I still feel that those labels have value in discovery or rediscovery or figuring stuff out. There is a risk to them, there is a concern, but I feel they sometimes get dismissed when you say the things that you say. And there is real like we are in a different position so we can perceive the affordances and the dangers of those labels, the constraints that those labels provide, but I don't know whether everybody else can or feel
You've
they
lost me. What do you mean we're in a different position?
not necessarily a different position. That's not the right like
Because like
okay
going back to the
if
example, if your other half doesn't perceive, I believe they are perceiving the pan there, but
yeah
they're deliberately choosing their focus elsewhere. They're thinking about something else to do in the day, right? I assume that might be what happens because that happens to me sometimes where I'm in a room, I can perceive what's in the room, but I'm not thinking about it. Similar with driving, you're driving down the road, I don't
yeah
remember that I drove through the green light because I was thinking about something else. Like halfway home, I'm like, how did I get here? Because you're thinking about something else. You're still perceiving, you're still acting within the environment, but you are doing other things at the same time. Multitasking. That's how I would describe multitasking.
no you can't multitask
No,
you can
exactly.
only ever do one thing at a time.
If you define tasks poorly, yes. So for me, that would describe that experience is they are attuning their focus elsewhere. Why they are attuning their focus elsewhere would be my curiosity, would be my question. Like when I'm coaching some of the kids, they do the same sorts of things. You ask them to do something, they go, "Oh, yeah, I'll do that." And then they'll just bounce for like 15, 20 seconds because they're thinking about something completely different. One of the boys yesterday was thinking about his sticker book and what sticker that he was going to put in the sticker book when we asked him to do a full twist. And the coach was getting frustrated. And I asked him, "Oh, what are you thinking about?" "Oh, I was thinking, I can't remember the name of the sticker. It's like from Ben 10, some animal. Oh, yeah, I wasn't sure whether I want to put this sticker on there or that sticker on there." I was like, "Oh, okay. Can we think about that afterwards?" "Oh, yeah, 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 I can do that." But if I hadn't asked him what he was thinking about instead of the skill, he would have continued
Mm.
thinking about that because that was more interesting to him at the time.
So
He
that's a comment I've often said, and the reaction is, I don't know.
But if they don't know, then it means they're not tuning their focus to anything, which
Mm.
it's not they're not attuning their focus to anything. It's there's nothing specific, like thinking in the field of affordances, there's nothing
Yeah.
specifically that is high enough for them to be thinking about, which is perfectly normal because it happens to me, it happens to everyone. It's not a, oh my God, I'm so different, I'm not thinking about anything. No, it's normal. It happens to everyone. But the skill that some people have developed, to which other people haven't developed, whether it's innate, whether it's environmental, we don't know, we can't prove, but is attuning to something. It's the, oh, it's a click of the fingers, wake up sort of thing. That wake up, some people can do quicker than others. Why? Great question. We don't know. Science doesn't have
Yeah.
an answer to. That's where a coach, an educator, someone else, just a friend, a family member in that environment can help you go, hey, what are you doing? I don't know. And then you get back on track. It's not back on track, but you can attune to something that's more effective for doing whatever the behaviors are. But that is lived experience. That's not a problem. It's lived experience.
Yeah, I agree. It's not a problem. I don't see it as a problem either. Yeah. Let's just experience things. Yay.
And that's where I find the label bit frustrating because they go, oh, I'm standing there, I'm not thinking about a thing, or I walked in a room and I forgot, oh, that's my ADHD. And then you have all the other social context and expectations and
Yeah, I
problems that
said,
come. And I'm
yeah.
like, that was a behavioral experience. That doesn't mean you have all of these other things that go with the label,
Mm.
which is where my frustration is. If you say, oh, yes, this behavior relates to those that have ADHD, the average of ADHD behaviors, yes, I agree. That behavior may look like ADHD average behavior. That doesn't mean you have, that doesn't mean you struggle with, it doesn't mean you have problems with. It's just, it's a relation to that average behavior. How you
Mm.
improve will be different from everyone else and how they improve.
So in other words, yeah, no, I see what you mean. I'm understanding more of like why you don't like labels and they aren't very useful.
They can
It,
be useful if used
yeah.
what I would class as appropriately with
So
effective concern.
what's an appropriate use of a label then? So let's use ADHD or autism. How do you effectively use that label then?
I would use it as averages when describing people. So if,
Mm.
for
So it's
example,
less condition and more community.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So I would use it as the ADHD community. That to me is an effective use because it's socially constructed. The socially constructed community that focus their attention on ADHD, that doesn't necessarily mean ADHD, people with ADHD. That's people that talk about, people that research, people that discuss ADHD and all of the behaviors and social contexts that go around that. Because it's the averages. It's the averages of behavior. It's not specific behaviors.
Okay.
So when, for example, I'm working in a SEND group, maybe there are 3 that are diagnosed ADHD. I would say I'm working with my ADHD group because it's the averaged behaviors of the people in the group. But each of those individuals are going to behave drastically differently. So when I'm actually doing the session, ADHD has nothing to do with the behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's how I would use it effectively because, like I say, it's an average. It's not accurate enough to describe a behavior for me.
So whenever you're saying that it's inaccurate from a place of like when you're working one-on-one with when you're working with someone directly, it becomes unhelpful. It becomes
It's too broad.
yeah, how you can't take a broad experience and assign it to one individual, which I definitely agree with. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's my frustration when people see the label being used in online conversation. Most of the time where I've seen it is they describe a situation, a behavior, a scenario, and they say, this is my ADHD.
Yeah,
No,
nah,
no.
I don't like that use of that label either. In that context, I can't stand that label usage. That's my ADHD. No, it's you. and that's okay. Let's
And
talk about
that is
that.
where I think a lot of the conflict happens, because everyone can relate to the behavioral experience. Because everyone will have that behavioral experience just differently, which is why when people say, oh, we all have ADHD just to a different level, that is where the frustration comes. Because yes, everyone does have ADHD to a specific level because everyone behaves, everyone acts in the world.
Yeah.
Everyone that's alive will have experiences that could be averaged into the ADHD label. But it's not significant enough for the diagnosis, the medical diagnosis, which are the lines, but they come up with the lines. And those lines, as we've discussed before with the DSM-5, are pretty poor.
Yeah.
So when
Well,
it comes to describing the behaviors, as soon as you use this averaged label, everyone goes, well, yeah, everyone does that, which is not useful. And then you get social comparison, social construction, social context, which bring in arguments that are not necessary and they're not useful for anything
no,
apart from
because the
just
people are
arguing.
just too busy arguing over who is neurodiverse versus neurotypical, and then you've got all the and yeah,
Exactly.
that side of things I just don't enjoy. Just,
Which is why I would prefer people, instead of discussing neurodiversity, ADHD, ASD, dyspraxia, instead of discussing those things, discuss the behavior, discuss the scenario. How did you get through it? How didn't you get through it? What was the problem? What were the goal-directed behaviors that you were trying to do? What constraints did you bring in? What affordances did you perceive that you didn't expect to be attuning to? Those sorts of experiences is what's more useful, which is why I'm vlogging, because it's more useful than going, hey, business, that's great, isn't it? What the fuck does that mean? Like, sports coaching is hard because business is difficult and finding a venue is difficult, right? Okay, find what sort of venue. Why do you need that venue? What height? What price? Be specific. Specifics help with the problem. As we say, context matters. Rant over.
Cool. No, it's good.
So yeah, so that's how I would answer your question. That one question that we started with like half an hour ago.
I knew it was going to be a good one, so I was like, let's go. Let's dive into that.
So a follow-up question then. Why did you ask the question?
Because one, I wanted to challenge more because I do have a tendency to just go yes. So it was me making an actual decision to behave differently and go, I don't think because whenever I have these conversations with you, like I sit back a little bit. Whereas when I go away, I'm like, oh yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but what about this? And then by the time we get around to it, we're talking about something completely different. And so I was like, I'm gonna gather and also to just take the time to gather my thoughts on the subject as well. And then I was like, yeah. And then it was me watching your conversation with Julia with the labels aren't useful, which I know is a YouTube thing at part. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't fully, I think I know what you're trying to say, but I also don't like the way you're saying it. And so I assumed it was a YouTube thing to grab people's attention and draw people into ask on. And then I'm like, you know what? I've been thinking about this for a couple of weeks. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna ask when we have a pause. I'm just gonna go and we're gonna dive into it because I find it interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna say why I think you're wrong for a change, but I don't think you're wrong. It's just exploring the nuances of that conversation because I think that's people only see the broad strokes, not the nuance. And so asking the questions gave the nuance. Because actually it's not the fact that you think labels suck, it's just they suck in this situation, which is the situation that you find yourself in most of the time, which is one-on-one with people, which is why it sucks, which I agree.
Yep. Yeah. The reason I asked why is because, as we've just discussed, it doesn't just appear. You've obviously been thinking about it before.
Oh yeah, of course I have.
And
I've been
as
thinking
you
about this
said,
for a
you're like
while.
2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Yeah.
Because that's what I was talking with David about when we talked about flow and flow states and timescales. Like I could be thinking about something for 3, 4, a year, months, whatever, before I actually do something that people would recognize as, okay, you've started. No. This behavior looks more significant towards a directed goal that you can see externally. That's different. But adding all of that context into a YouTube title is like impossible.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted to be really nuanced in the title, but people aren't going to read a 50-word YouTube title.
No. No, which is hence why the blogs, I would assume.
The blogs, yeah. Yeah, the idea about the vlogs is for it to be a continuous story. So for
Mm.
people watching like daily or almost daily, they will see a trend throughout the videos because it's my lived experience that I'm expressing. So at the moment, obviously, the focus on insurance and trampoline because that's what I'm working through, but there's also bits in there about my level 1 course because I'm doing that. First one is on Tuesday, but then there's also a bit about, yeah, you've probably seen some of those clips and gone, oh, wow. But then there's also bits in there where I'm alluding to me coming back into trampoline, the one I'm recording at the moment. I actually have a recording of the last session yesterday where I'm just doing some straight jumps because in Portugal I'm going to be trampoline, and it's the vlog is to help expose all of the areas that I'm interested in more depth with more nuance throughout the day rather than, hey, here's a 2-hour block of me trying to figure out how to explain this in a way that YouTube aren't going to throw you under the bus and say,
Yeah.
nope, this was boring.
So instead, you're just going to throw it under the bus anyway and continue.
Well, it's easier to make, or it's easier for people to watch a 10-minute video that covers sort of like broad topics here and there. And if they're interested, they can go back a couple of days. Or me just link to where I talk about a little bit more, like inclusion in sport. I don't know whether you've seen that video where I went to Defiant Sport. But I went to Defiant Sport, which is a Send group community. It's a CIC, community interest company, or yeah, something like that. And they work not only, but mainly with Send individuals. And it's a community charity. It's a charity that work mainly with individuals. And they were saying that some of their sessions, because they've got individuals that are sensitive, so they have deafeners, they have sense rooms. They can't have some people. So to be inclusive, you need to be exclusive. Now, I recognize that from uni, but they do that deliberately. We can't they can't have 15 people in some sessions because some individuals can't deal with that many people. So you need to be exclusive. Saying that to coaches gets them ruffled a bit sometimes because they're like, oh no, everyone can come. No, so everyone can come along. That's excluding people. You are excluding by being all inclusive. So you need to be exclusive to be inclusive. And that's what I talk about in the video. So if I talk about inclusion or exclusion, I can just point, but like, hey, I've discussed it more over there.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember that one because I was like, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, but it is these sorts of things that I find interesting as a coach that I don't think other coaches recognize or think about because they're not on the courses. Like you don't hear about, oh, you need to be exclusive in your sessions to be inclusive. I haven't seen that on any of the courses I've done. I haven't seen it in any of the conversations online with sports coaches either. And I'd imagine it's similar with business coaches. Oh no, you want to attract as many people as you can. You want a big funnel. Like, no, actually, you want to be
So what
restrictive.
they have is niching, which is which is a similar thing, which is excluding people. But the problem is they've taken it to a weird level
Mm.
where it's like you have to just have these. Yeah, niching drives me insane anyway because people go, you've got to find your niche as if there is a correct niche when really you already have a niche. It's there.
And going back to the labels, what's a niche? An average of people.
Yeah.
Where do you put that arbitrary average line to say, yeah, that's my niche? You can't. You
Can't.
you can't
Which
because
is
it's
why people struggle
dynamic.
so much with finding their niche.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I dropped my fiddle toy, which is all my bookmarks. Yeah. I'm not diagnosed neurodiverse, but I have fidget toys. I've referred to saying diagnosed neurodiverse now because I don't want to say the list each time. I don't know whether that's acceptable or not, but actually, I'm interested to get your thoughts on this. So, I don't know whether you saw my video about talking at Active Sussex, the presentation.
Yes, I did. I did watch that one. That was really interesting.
Yeah. So there was a talk before the deaf one, which was about visually impaired. And obviously, I am visually impaired, as well as hearing impaired. I didn't mention that in the talk. I was like, hearing impaired's enough for everyone right now. I have been asked to do a follow-up, but maybe we'll talk about that afterwards. So I was talking with the visually impaired cricketers and asking them what their thoughts are on the labels. Are they visually impaired? Are they blind? Are they blackout blind? Do they describe it via their number of visual impairment? Like, how do they talk about it? And they just say, oh, we're blind. I mean, they were very flippant about it. They're sarcastic individuals. Like, oh, one of them was
British.
like older 50. Yeah, one of them was older 50s, very traditionally like Monty Python-esque. So you're not going to get like a serious straight answer. And then the other one's like mid 30s and very, very similar. And we were all similar in the wit, like, yeah, whatever. Call us whatever you want. Like, no, I blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, fine. But when it comes to the other individuals in the room, they weren't sure what to call us. Like, are you visually impaired? Are you blind? Are you blackout blind? Like, what word do we use to describe you? That to me is where blind is helpful, because it's an average of people. The average sight of those people is visually impaired can be described as blind. But if you talk to the individual and say, oh, you're blind, I'm half blind. And if you want to be really specific, I'm half visually impaired, because I'm not blackout blind in my right eye. I can see light. It's just extremely blurred. What are your thoughts? Like, when someone asks you, do you say you're half blind?
I
Do you
just
say
say
you're visually
partially
impaired?
sighted. Yeah, visually shared.
Visually shared? Who are you seeing
Yeah,
eyes through?
visually impaired, half blind. Yeah, I usually use half blind in conversation.
Because I think, obviously, through language, blind is an average term that we recognize as an average term, but it's recognizable enough to other people we're communicating to, that we have a visual impairment of some kind. If they are interested in, oh, so you can't see, now they're interested in the experiences we have. Now I would be like specific. Well, I can see, but it's partial. And then I would explain it and they go, wow, oh, okay, etc., etc. But a lot of people just go, all right, okay, and then they move on, because they don't care about how blind or what sort of blind. They just recognize that I can't see out of one eye.
Yeah.
That to me, I think, is a useful use for labels, blind, deaf, as a label. Does that help give context?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So would you class yourself as deaf?
Good question.
Because you are.
Yeah, strictly speaking.
You are now part of the deaf community. Anyone that has a hearing impairment is part of the deaf community.
I suppose so then.
But you wouldn't call yourself deaf?
I don't think so, no. Half deaf, maybe? But it's still really new as well.
It's the same with me in my eye.
Would you call yourself half blind at all?
Yes, I do now, but
it's been about a year, hasn't it? Yeah,
no, 4.
4. Shit. Yeah.
Yeah, 2020 is when I lost it. Right at the beginning of it. Yeah. Well, the thing that's interesting here is I never, as in never, up until about a year ago, considered myself deaf. Never considered it. I was just a person that had some ear problems. That was it. I never really considered like the awareness of being deaf. Like I said this to my parents a couple of months ago. It's like, what?
Same experience. Because of course I am blind, but I don't talk about it. I talk about my neurodiversity more, my autism more than I talk about being blind, because it just is something. And then I started questioning that recently. It's like, why do I talk about this and not this?
Exactly. Because it's the behavioral experiences that I have is what I talk about. Oh, if you're in that side of the room, I can't hear you. It's not, oh, I'm deaf, can you please do things to help me?
So maybe the label at first, from an individual perspective, helps people figure out what the behaviors that they're doing are, and sometimes you can end up associating it with a label, which is where I'm like, oh, it's you.
And see, that's the thing. Since I've adopted the label of deaf, as expected, people treat me drastically differently. As soon as they hear, get it? Here. As soon as they hear that I'm deaf, I love making that joke because like joking about my own hearing. Yeah, as soon as they hear that I'm deaf, they treat me differently. And at the Active Sussex conference, it was really obvious that the label deaf made it actually harder, because everyone had this expectation of me, what I could, what I couldn't do, struggles, etc., etc. And this experience made, like, I appreciated it, but I also recognized that I wouldn't have appreciated it even like a few years ago. Because we were in a room and there was a microphone, microphones suck for me. Like it's just it was like, I have no idea what you're saying. I
That's because
can't.
people don't know how to hold microphones or use microphones properly, and that's the only reason why.
And the sound system as well, because if the sound system's poor, then it just sounds like a load of noise to me. Um, because of the vibrations in the room and they just bounce and smack, and I ain't got a clue. But yeah, so the microphone doesn't help, or it doesn't help me. Didn't help me in that room, doesn't help me most of the time. So I rely on lip reading. But we're in a room seated in like tables in like a classroom office room, which again I struggle to see because I can't lip read, like I can't lip read across a room with people's heads in the way. And so I just expected to do the normal thing of I'll work out what the question was from looking at the answer because the person's at the front. But they wanted to be accessible to me. So they asked me, well, what would make it easier for you? I said, well, the easiest thing would be for them to look at me and so I can lip read them. And so that's what they did. So every time anyone spoke, they were either told to, asked to, or reminded to look at me when they spoke, even though they were talking to someone else. So that made it obviously everyone's now focused on me. Oh, can you just look at Danny when talk? Can you just look at Danny when you talk? And I'm like, everyone is looking at me when they're talking to someone else so that I can understand what's going on. Now, I was okay with it, but a few years ago, I'd be like, nope, nope, you go away, stop looking at me. And that's because I said I was deaf, and they wanted to help my needs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I hadn't told them I was deaf and I hadn't told them my struggles, they wouldn't have done that. And I would have still managed, still worked through it because of the tools that I've developed, not having that support. And that's where, like, for me, the label, I'm like, there are places where I feel like it can help when I'm talking about an average behavior, but there are a lot of places where it doesn't help. And the half blind bit, I think, also doesn't help. Because if I say I'm half deaf, half blind, people's immediate reaction is, wow, how do you manage? I'm like, I live. Like I put one foot in front of the other, make sure there's no wall there, but yeah, and then keep go on about my day. Like I just do.
I bump into things. That's what I do.
I used to.
Or fall over.
I've got used to it now. As you can see, I still stub my toe on things. I still walk into walls and drop stuff, but nowhere near as much as I did when I first lost my eyesight.
That must be so interesting from someone whose experience has been like blind from birth, and the differences of our experiences.
Yeah. I mean,
that'd be an interesting conversation.
Maybe we talk about it next week.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I am planning on doing a video about my sight, losing my sight, because I've done one about my hearing story-ish. So yeah, right. Well, we're talking about not being able to see next week, and you can't see us, so because obviously podcast. So,
Bye.
Bye.